loosen and remove the body nut. If yours is equipped with a fluid type of strut originally, compress the strut cartridge by pushing down on the piston rod, and then pull the piston rod upwards while holding the bottom of the cartridge down in the strut housing with a screwdriver. This will remove the excess fluid in the bottom of the strut housing, which is not necessary for the installation of the new gas cartridge. And lastly, remove the original strut cartridge from the housing. Another method for removing the excess fluid on the strut body is to use an oil suction gun as shown once the old cartridge has been removed. Place the new body nut on the new strut. The pins of the spanner wrench fit the holes in the body nut as shown. Insert the new strut cartridge in the housing and tighten the body nut securely. Be sure you final tighten the body nut to the correct recommended torque specification. Now, reassemble the compression bumper to the compression bumper retainer. Again, notice how the spanner wrench fits the retainer. With the bumper in place, install the compression bumper retainer and tighten it securely. This nut simply locks in place, so torquing it is not necessary. Next, reinstall the strut mount bushing. Install the new piston rod nut, starting it on the threads by hand. And finish by torquing it to the correct torque specification. Lastly, reinstall the strut mount cover and retaining nuts. Just like on any suspension bolt, make sure to complete final tightening by torquing the nuts with a torque wrench. Test drive the vehicle and listen for any clunks or noises, and you're done. You've restored the comfort and ride stability to your vehicle and saved yourself money at the same time.
Let's review replacing a W10 strut. First, read all the instructions thoroughly. Open the hood and remove the retaining nuts and mounting cover. Remove the piston rod nut and strut mount bushings. Using a special spanner nut tool, loosen and remove the compression bumper retainer. Next, loosen and remove the body nut. Remove the strut cartridge, and remove any fluid still left in the strut body. Install the new gas strut cartridge in the housing and tighten the body nut. Reassemble and reinstall the compression bumper and retainer onto the strut cartridge. Reinstall the strut bushing and piston rod nut. Reinstall the strut mount cover and retaining nuts. Finally, test drive the vehicle to ensure proper replacement.
Hey Sam, how about that bounce test now?
Well, what we're going to do here, Scott, is we're going to push down on the car a couple of times, and we're going to be looking for a couple of things. First off, how's the dampening devices, whether their shocks or struts, feel when we push down on it? And secondly, when we let go of the car, how many cycles does it go afterwards? Typically about 2.5 cycles is borderline. Whether you have shocks or struts, if it goes more than 2.5 cycles, it's definitely shot and should be replaced.
Okay, well, why don't we check this one? It looked pretty mushy to me.
This is real mushy. This one went about 4.5, 5 cycles, and the struts on this particular car do need to be replaced.
Okay, now that's a very accurate test to determine if my shocks need replacing too, although, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, how difficult is it to replace my own shocks?
Why don't we take a look?
All right.
The first step is to park the vehicle on a level surface. Raise the end you'll be working on and support it with a set of jack stands. Make sure the jack stands are placed under the frame or a jack point and allow the weight of the vehicle to set down on the jack stands. Then block the tires on the opposite end of the vehicle from where you'll be working. If you're replacing the front shock absorbers, the top mounts will most likely be located under the hood of your vehicle and may be covered by a rubber or plastic protector. If you're replacing the rear shocks, the top mounts may be located under the car or may be located inside the trunk area. To help loosen rusty or stubborn bolts, spray all mounting hardware with a liberal amount of penetrating oil. For best results, do so a day before you are going to replace them to allow 24 hours for the penetrating oil to be effective. Although not necessary for most shock installations, we remove the front tire for ease of view. Next, remove the upper mounting bolt or bolts. In our example, the lower mount is also held in place with one bolt. Some vehicles have upper mounts that are held in place by two mounting bolts like this, while others have a single stud for an upper mount. When working on shocks with a single mounting stud, a shock installation tool as shown will help prevent the piston rod from turning when removing the nut. Here's how to use it. Place a hexagonal-shaped socket on the piston rod nut. Then use the special flange socket to hold the piston rod steady while removing the piston rod nut with an open-end wrench. Next, remove the lower mounting bolt or bolts and remove the old shock from the vehicle. On most front shock installations, the shock will have to be removed from the bottom side. If you're installing shocks with a single upper mount rod, install the cupped washer and rubber grommet before positioning the shock in the vehicle. Next, position the shock in place and install the lower mounting bolts. Install the upper mounting bolts and tighten them to the correct torque specification. On shocks with a single upper mounting rod, install the final rubber bushing, cupped washer, and rod nut. Tighten the piston rod nut until the rubber bushings expand to the same size as the outer diameter of the washer. Again, this is where the shock installation tool comes in handy. Lastly, take the car down off the jack stands and test drive the vehicle. Listen for any abnormal sounds such as loose mounts and note the handling characteristics of the vehicle.
Let's review inspecting and changing your shock absorbers. Do the bounce test to determine if the shocks need replacement. To replace your shock absorbers, first park the vehicle on a level surface and support safely. Spray all mounting bolts and nuts with penetrating oil to ease removal. Remove the upper and lower mounting bolts. Remove the shock absorber from the vehicle. Install any new hardware or rubber grommets onto the new shock. Place the new shock in the vehicle and install the lower mounting bolts. Next, install the upper mounting bolts, tightening to the proper torque specification. Lastly, test drive the vehicle to ensure proper replacement.